It's good to see you again. It's Pastor Scott from Oak Ridge Community Church. Another edition of Life Minutes. We're continuing a series that we began a few weeks ago, called Urban Legends. The last two videos focused on the Christmas season. The first video we did discussed what was called the unpardonable sin. We tried to clear up what that really is, and I would encourage you, if you did not watch that video, to go back and view it. We dealt with one of those tough issues that is found in Scripture. Today, we're going to talk about what is known as the gap theory. I'm going to read two verses from Genesis 1 that is connected to this theory, and then we're going to talk about this theory, and I'm going to share with you why I do not believe in the gap theory. Though there are good Bible students, Bible scholars who do, I have a different viewpoint than these individuals, and I'll explain why. And then I'll explain why I think it's important to know where we stand on this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right? That's verse 1, the very first verse of the Bible. Verse 2 says, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." This gap theory, as we call it, became very popular through the Scofield Bible. So if you have a Scofield Study Bible and you go back and read Genesis 1 in his notes, he will explain his view of what is called the gap theory. Thomas Chalmers, a minister from a couple of centuries before Scofield, he also believed in this. And so these are kind of the two main names that are connected to this gap theory that has become popular among many Christians. Somewhere, according to gap theorists, a cataclysmic event of some sort happened between these two verses that we read in Genesis. Some people believe and think that this is when Satan fell. All right? And so when Satan fell, God's beginning creation was then tainted by sin, the original creation, and God had to step in, we might say, and do some cleaning up. It is this theory that is also used by theistic evolutionists to present the idea that Adam and Eve may not have been the first created humans. The thought is there may have been some type of pre-Adamic world that God had to deal with because of sin entering the original creation. So God had to restart everything. And so there's the thinking that, well, there may have been people that existed before Adam and Eve. That, to me, there's no biblical evidence for that, but that's what some think. This also is used by some, this theory, to explain why the universe could be millions of years old. In other words, God began his creation, something bad happened, and then God waited a long period of time before actually recreating things, all right? So I want to just quickly explain why I think this is, in my opinion, an urban legend, okay? I don't break fellowship with people if they believe in the gap theory. That's their call, all right? I don't, and it's okay that I don't, and it's okay that they do. But I just don't think it holds weight biblically, all right? Nowhere in Scripture is a gap hinted at. You won't find it, no matter how hard you look. One, I don't believe the Hebrew language of these verses support it. The earth did not become formless. It was without form and void, as the Scripture says. Now, we could spend a lot of time on the Hebrew words of these first two verses. We don't have time to do that. I believe verses 1 and 2 is a general statement about the condition of the earth before God's creative events of Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 through 31. And I don't see in the Hebrew language that there needs to be some gap there. 2, Genesis 2, 3 and 4 summarizes God's entire creative work. All right? Not a recreative work, creative work. Also, if God's creation was very good, as Genesis 1:31 says, it's not accurate to say that if God had to recreate everything. Okay? It doesn't work. 3, Romans chapter 5, verses 12 through 21 is clear when sin entered the human race and where it began. Okay? It didn't happen in some pre-creation that God had to kind of wipe out and start over. Sin entered the human race in Genesis 3. I believe Satan fell sometime after God created everything. The bottom line is, I just don't think that gap theory has any support when it comes to the scriptural account of creation. We could spend literally hours discussing this in greater detail. But here's the thing I just want us to keep in mind. This is not worth breaking fellowship with somebody or accusing somebody of heresy if, though, they use this to support theistic evolution, the belief that God used evolution to do his creation. I have real issues with that. The Bible is clear, in my opinion. God spoke everything into existence in 6 days, 6 24-hour days. I don't think there was a gap. I think it's one of those things that people have come to accept for whatever the reasons. But we don't need a gap theory to try to explain Genesis 1 and 2, because I think they flow together. All right, thanks for joining me, and see you next week for a last look at an urban legend.